All right, so yeah, we got that coming up, and yeah, Peter and I and Justin have our presentation on Wednesday. It's kind of fun for the freshmen, sophomores.
Oh, it's the three of you doing it all together?
Yeah.
Is it over Zoom or are you guys all just going into the church?
It's into the chapel, yeah. We're gonna end up, we'll record it for the Gordon Institute and have it recorded.
Oh, that's gonna be the podcast of the week?
Yeah, we're actually gonna do a podcast after that, so we figured the topic is good. Marco, are you able to, so I don't have to tilt my head to watch you, are you able to do a little, there you go, okay, good.
Yes, sir.
All right, so we're going to get into non-bank finance is what chapter 13 is. So introduction, chapter 1 and 2 is about 16 pages. That's due tomorrow. So you guys have some reading. It shouldn't be that long. It's not that long. It's only 16 pages. The pages are pretty friendly. It's not like you're reading Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged or something. So give that a read. Yeah, the introduction, which is very short. I mean, it's like a 2-page introduction. Chapter 1 is fundamental themes, which is only like 5 pages long. And then chapter 2 is what happened. It basically gives a little quick synopsis. So it's only 16 pages.
So we're doing intro chapter 1 to chapter 2.
Yeah.
Is there a section for each of those?
Yes. No, I'm going to combine the intro and number 1.
So we're going to want 4 for chapter 1.
For what?
4 bullet points.
Well, yeah, we're following the same thing. You know, how does this apply to your life, type of thing, or whatever. Read the instructions on it, but yeah.
But do you want 2 for the intro?
No, you can just combine them into one. Yeah. So, anything else there? So, intro in chapter 1. I'll have that on the blackboard, so if you forget, you can just look that up. And that'll be our new reading that will continue on. We're going to chunk through basically most of this book. So we're going to spend a little more time on this one.
We're almost halfway through there, right?
Huh?
We're almost halfway through, right? Is this week 4 or week 3?
Yeah, week 4.
That's crazy.
Yeah, this is like midterms, people, so.
It feels like we just started. I mean, we did.
Yeah, no, that 8-week thing, you're thumping away here, so. All right, so let's see, I'm pulling this up, but I don't think I'm actually going to start with this. Since I have it down. And maybe this is as good a time as any to look at GameStop. GameStop stock. 245. So there was a bit of a sell-off this morning at the bell. 213, and then it hung in there. But you can believe that this part of the day, 300. You know, there was some decent loss taking or possibly gain taking. Tell me how the stock could be dropping down to here, but you still are taking on a gain. You bought lower than this, right? So did you lose money or did you make money? Were there people that bought at $75 and it was here and it's like, oh my gosh, look at the opening 30 minutes. Sell, sell, sell at whatever this is, 2 something, right? Because maybe it's going to go correct itself down at the bottom. So again, kind of that. Don't know. You're gambling if you are dabbling right now with that, but it's sure is fun to watch. Questions or comments, Aaron? Looks like it's found equilibrium or something here. I don't know. I think you got half the people betting it's going to go back up to 400 and half the people not. We'll talk about that phenomenon at some point in time too. Okay. So non-bank finance. We're going to jump into insurance right away. So we've got insurance comes to mind, pensions, mutual funds, basically everything that's out there that's in a big way that is not bank related. So most of our time digging into the details was banks. And so now we're going to look at some of these other entities and what makes them tick. We're talking about hedge funds. Then in the limelight, we'll get into the details of the structure of a hedge fund and what they look like as part of a non-bank finance element here for Chapter 13. So non-bank finance, so Chapter 13, non-bank. I'm going to lead off with insurance companies. And start off with life insurance. Life insurance tends to be a pretty big player. Who can tell me what a life insurance policy is, just in general? I'll try to keep my eyes on you Zoom guys too, if you raise your hand, or otherwise you can always unmute if you want. Isaac.
So there's different types of life insurance policies, like term and whole.
Okay, yep.
Pretty much with a life insurance policy is you pay a certain amount each month, so that way when you die or when your certain period is up, depending on which one you get a certain amount of money at the end of it.
Okay.
So like
at the end of what, how do you get the money?
So if it's whole, it's when you die.
Okay.
If it's term, I don't know if it's at the end of the term or you still die. I think most of it's when you die.
That's the thing about
it's for if you die.
Yeah, it's for if you die. So a better term is actually death insurance rather than life insurance, because it really is who you've left behind that you're trying to insure. So the customer pays, as Isaac said, premiums per time period, you know, usually per month or year or quarter or whatever. So that a death benefit, so the benefit is the kind of a death benefit will be paid to beneficiaries at death of the insured. So that kind of in a nutshell talks about the flow of funds, right? So you are paying premiums every month, maybe it's $100 a month or per year, whatever it is. You're going to be making those premiums. So the insurance company has a longer term or time horizon of money coming in, or a short term? A little bit longer term, right? If we're talking about, you know, it depends if it's if it's an 80-year-old who's taking out the policy, it might be pretty short, but how much are the premiums going to be?
Really high.
Super high, right? What? You're 80 years old and you want $1 million policy? Your premiums are going to be $200,000 per year. It's just an actuarial thing, right? The insurance company's not playing a game like, oh, what if, or flipping a coin. They have data on how long an 80-year-old's going to last, given their current health conditions, and they are willing to market to you some sort of insurance product, but you might not like the price. So most people who are 80 don't have, or don't go out and get a life insurance policy. It doesn't really make sense for a lot of them at that point in their life. And so the premiums are going to adjust depending on how much time. Real cheap for you guys to go out and get an insurance policy, because as a 20-something, your chance of dying in the next 40 years is very small. If you made it to age 18, you bypassed some of the weird diseases that people could have by now. You've already gone through high school and you could have died of a car accident, like some of you know. Some of your friends at high school died. Unfortunately, they died, but they died, right? But when you're now your age and you've made it through that crap of your life, it's like, oh, geez, what's your chance of dying in the next 40 years? It's very small. So you guys are likely getting there. You're in a little bit more of a danger zone than a 30-something, but because your 20-somethings might still have a few drunken driving incidents, or you guys are so much better at that than when I was your age, but you know, crap happens to 20-somethings that's different than what life happens in 30-somethings and 40-somethings, right? So the insurance companies know all this stuff, and they put probabilities on all of that stuff happening because they have to be careful of this outflow, the death benefit. So that's going to come unexpectedly. Some of the 20-somethings are going to die, and they're going to have to make that payment, and they don't know when it's going to come up exactly. They can tell pretty good on average. So by having the normal insurance gain, by getting big enough pool of people coming in, so if we have 1,000 20-somethings, we know that 3% of you are going to croak in the next 10 years, but I don't know which 3 of you are going to go, right, or 30 of you are going to go. And so that's just the general pooling game that insurance companies play. All right, questions or comments? Yeah, JC?
So let's say you're 20 years old, you get a life insurance for $100 a month. Let's say you get 30 years old, just go life insurance change, you keep the same amount.
Is it going to change?
As you get older.
Depends on the type of policy, which I'm going to get into next, whether it would change or not. Dakota? Okay, because I'm going to add the term and whole life that Isaac brought it to. So maybe I'll just go into that, and then we can open up the floor again. So, so the 2 types here of life insurance policy, you've got permanent, which is sometimes called whole life, universal life. They've come up with different names, variable life. All those are different types of permanent policies. All it means is that you're going to have the option to keep this policy your whole life. Now, depending on what type you have, the premiums might change as you go, but not necessarily. It could be fixed policy too. And then you can have different options of, okay, after 20 years, we're not going to drop you, but your premiums could go up, but the most they're going to go up is 100%. They won't more than double or whatever. They can have all those kinds of schemes. So the whole idea with permanent is the customer has option to keep policy until death, which might sound weird to you. Well, that's what you buy life insurance anyway, but you can always cancel it, but they can't cancel you. It's kind of a one-way decision. The company is promising that, hey, you get cancer in 10 years, you have this or that, it doesn't matter, you're going to be covered until you die. So that's the idea of permanent insurance. Term insurance has a specified term where it goes away. So with a term policy, this has a specified ending date. So basically, to get it, you need to die before the ending date. So to get the benefit, you need to die before the term ends. You might have $1 million term policy, and it ends in 2040, January 15th. And then you die January 16th. Has that ever happened before? Sure. Probably pretty unlikely, but if you die after that term date, the insurance company doesn't owe your beneficiaries anything. It's done. That was the contract. They're not doing anything deceitful or immoral or anything. It's not greed. It's not nothing. It's just a contract that you had with the company. You agreed to do it this way at the end of the term. So how does a term policy for you guys now, if you're 20-something, how does a 20-year term policy compare in price to a a whole life policy. What's going to be the difference? What's the advantage to you of like, oh, but that kind of sucks. If I die, then I might not get anything. I paid in all that money for 20 years. But what's going to be different for you if you choose the term policy? Jeremiah?
Terms going to be cheaper.
Terms going to be way cheaper, actually. Yeah. So it's going to be way cheaper. Sometimes it could be the difference for a 20-something of, let's say, one of the Dave Ramsey examples comes to my mind since I've been teaching that class for so long. $126 a month to $20 a month. Literally, $126 a month to $20 a month. Because why? If you guys take out a 20-year term policy right now, what's your chance of dying? Very, very, very slim, right? Next to nothing. So even if you have $1 million policy, it's going to be really cheap because the probability of you dying over that next 20 years is close to nothing. Could it happen? Yeah, so could hitting the lottery, right? Somebody's got to win. Well, somebody's got to lose too over that 20-year period. Hopefully it won't be you and it'll be the flip side that you'll get the lottery and not the death, but it's going to happen to somebody, right? That's the insurance game. Questions, comments, yeah?
Can't you borrow against your policy as well? Unless it's like a loan?
This one you can. Typically, there's some sort of borrowing. So I don't want to get too big into the details, but that's one of the things that makes this one a ripoff, is that they sell it to you as, hey, this is going to build up cash value, and then if an emergency happens, you can always borrow against it, or if something comes up in your life, that's how they package it to you. But that cash value not only sucks as an investment, so instead of doing the $126 policy and doing the $20 policy, you can take that $100 and reinvest it yourself over the long haul, earning 8 to 12% on your own. Well, the insurance company is doing exactly that. That's part of why we're having this discussion today. That's exactly what the bank is doing, or what the insurance company is doing, right? They're taking your $126 premium and they're buying stocks and bonds and other investment assets. And your cash value ends up being, let's say, a 1% growth or something, 2%, very safe. So your money's going to be there. That's the risk reward trade-off. But it's not going to grow very big. So it sucks as an investment is my main point. And then it gets worse though. If you die with a whole life and you had $1 million whole life policy and your cash value had built up to $30,000, when you die, so you have a cash value of $30,000 and $1 million whole life policy. When you die, you get just the $1 million. The cash value is just something that was there just in case. And so what the best strategy is, if you do have a whole life, is to borrow the $30,000 the day before you die. You can suck out that $30,000. You've got $30,000 in your hand. It was totally legit to do. And now you die and you get the $1 million plus the 30. So that's kind of an interesting nuance to this whole life stuff of how that's evolved over time. So it's not, it can be a good deal if you're irresponsible. I assume all of you guys being finance, accounting, economics majors, you can do better on your own. Don't buy this policy. So if you combine it now and you take your term policy 20 years from now, even with your student loan debt, if you're doing some budgeting and putting your money in the right type of investments and stuff, the idea is you can use term policies to protect yourself on the unknown that could still happen, but you build up your own wealth to be self-insured 20 years from now, so that you have $1 million if you needed $1 million in the first place, which you might. You have $1 million of your own personal wealth that has grown up. And then when the term policy falls away, and it's like, oh, I don't have a term policy. Yeah, but I got $1 million worth of investments. So if I die tomorrow, spouse, you're protected. Kids, I've got you covered. Our mortgage is going to be paid through this $1 million investment that I did with the difference. Okay, any other questions or comments there? I spent a little more time than I should have, but this is kind of a good thing to kind of think more about the insurance industry and not just personal. You guys good on Zoom? Give me a thumbs up if so. Okay, and Mark was good. Okay, all right, so that is the insurance. So why is that important. So key point here is insurance company invests customer premiums. They do the term policy premiums too, so this goes both ways. Insurance company invests customer premiums to prepare for expected benefits, benefit payments in the future. Okay, and so what does the insurance company do? What does the insurance company do to lower moral hazard and adverse selection issues? So this is more on the customer relationship to get us going. What are some things we've talked about in other classes, the first finance, other things, but yes, here.
Raise the price?
Raise the price. Okay, so they have to price their stuff correctly. So they don't. So what? Let me build on some mirrors here. So if State Farm raises their prices, what might be a correction if they raised it too much? What would be a market correction if they raised it too much? State Farm specifically raised their prices because of maybe one of these issues they were thinking about. They raised their prices. What would keep them from raising it too much? They go to Aflac. They go to somewhere else. So competition is going to be the regulator of the pricing mechanism. So here, we're going to want to set prices, but and taking into account these things, but competition is going to keep that at the right level for overall price. So I'm looking for some other tools that the insurance company might do to hedge against moral hazard adverse selection. Eddie?
Evaluation and reevaluation.
Okay, and what are they evaluating, reevaluating?
So to avoid adverse selection, you would evaluate the client about past incidences.
So what do you got to do when you go to buy the insurance policy? What do you got to fill out? That what? Background check, right? So some sort of screening. So screening. So number one, screening. So this is the the simple application. Do you ride bulls? Do you jump out of airplanes? Would they ask something like that on an insurance app? Yeah. They do ask something like that. I've filled these out before. Do you ride bulls? Do you do some other risky activities? If you're they want to get a risk profile on you. Of course, do you smoke? Do you that? So we can get into all the health screening. But so the application is one aspect of it. JC? Deductibles, good. So deductibles. What is a deductible? Go ahead, JC.
Money you have to pay up front.
Okay, so before you get your payment, actually they don't do it because you have the money anyway. They usually just deduct it, but it's a form of co-insurance. So, for example, you might have a $1,000 deductible and a $4,000 damage from an accident. Maybe this is healthcare, maybe this is a car, it all kind of functions the same. You're going to get a check for $3,000, right? You are self-insuring part of that problem. And so what happens to the company's risk as deductibles go up? What happens to the company's risk on you as the deductible rises? Okay, look, goes down, right? So the more you're sharing in the risk, the more here, and that kind of plays into moral hazard, probably more so than adverse selection. It can play into both a little bit on who you're attracting, but also what you do once you're under contract. I think the deductible tackles a little bit more of moral hazard, that if you have to cough up more money if there's an accident, you're going to be a little more careful. Whereas if you have a $250 deductible, you might drive a little more crazier than the $1,000 deductible. So this kind of comes, I wanted to swing this back to Samir a little bit. Risk-adjusted premiums is the pricing of this stuff. So number 3, risk-adjusted premiums. So if you are a risky person, they can give you a higher premium depending on if you ride goals or not. So that's another way that they can compete on that.
Would your past medical records that go into the screening?
Yeah, that'd be part of the screen. Yep. So cancellation is another aspect. Cancellation. I just got my insurance canceled for my property that I am fixing up, quote unquote. So I have a property near downtown Ottawa that I bought about 4 years ago now. I kind of laughed because I thought it'd go a little quicker. Maybe it was even 5 years ago. And so do insurance companies like vacant houses or occupied houses with renters? If they had to choose, would they take a vacant house that's just sitting there doing nothing, or one that's occupied by tenants, by renters? Which one would the insurance company prefer?
Vacant.
Vacant? Everybody agree with that?
Yeah.
I just got dropped because it's vacant. Why occupied?
Because it's guaranteed income, so you're.
No, they don't care. They don't give a damn about how much I make or not on the rental property. Olivia?
Isn't there more of a chance that something will happen for the vacant insurance if you're using it rather than vacant?
Yeah, which is actually an empirical finding that they have. So I'll give you an example. I had a tenant skip town up in Iowa, and they skipped town in December or January, I can't remember. And they hadn't paid their rent. So I'm like, well, shoot, I'm going to go pay a visit to these guys, you know, and give them a piece of my mind, tell them where rent's supposed to be dropped off. I go there, and they're freaking gone. They moved out on me. They also turned off the heat. And it was a hot water boiler system. And it felt a little clammy. So I went down to the basement, and I forgot that we had a swimming pool option, apparently, because there was 6 foot of water in the basement. They had moved out at along the first, we found out later, so they had been gone for 3 to 4 weeks, somewhere in that. The pipes busted, it flooded the basement, and there was 6 foot of water that stood there for 2 to 3 weeks. So guess what comes when you pump out the water? Are you ready to open for business right away? Nope. So mold and the hardwood floors, it was an older house, looked like a, you know, like a dirt bike track or something. So we had new flooring, mold crawling up the house. So basically a tenant just trashed it by it being vacant. So over the years, they found that if the place is occupied and there's a fire, well, there's at least somebody there to put out the fire, right? If something happens with the tenant. So occupied places are preferred. Back to my story. I bought a crappy house that needs a lot of work, and I've had it insured for a while, and they are more than willing to insure a property, but you know, how's your progress coming along with the improvements? And basically, I haven't done a lot with it in the last 4 years. And so I got a little cancellation notice in the mail 2 weeks ago. Now, I talked to my agent already, and they'll just find another company for me. He brokers insurance, so it's not like it'll be totally uninsured, or I can get another insurance policy. But bottom line is, companies have the right to cancel you if they don't like maybe some of the things that you're doing with that property. So they'll have rules that say, okay, owner needs to be making satisfactory progress towards completing the house or something. So they're willing to do it for short term, but after 4 years, I guess they got tired of me and my progress. So, Bryce.
And so those could change though from contract to contract, right? Like for different people.
Of why they might be canceled or something? Yes. Yeah. And so same thing with car insurance. DWI number 1, oh, no problem, we'll just jack your premiums. DWI number 2, you're gonna have to pay a little bit more. DWI number 3, you're probably canceled, right? They're not gonna continue to insure since you don't seem to be changing your behavior. You didn't learn your lesson the first time or the second time. And so they don't want to offer a premium that's high enough to cover your sorry butt, right? So canceling can be on there, all in the fine print that we don't read on the insurance premium when we get it all lined up. So, okay, any other comments there? Let's see, co-insurance, limits is another thing to write down. So limit, so basically a maximum payout. So car insurance, this is pretty common. Can be on health insurance too, but so if you get into a car wreck, you'll be covered up to $500,000 or $300,000 or whatever. So limits can help to do that. And then we can have, we talked about covenants before. Who remembers what a covenant is? A restricted covenant on your mortgage debt.
Don't go do something against the covenant.
Yeah, so just something you can't do. So they can have restrictive provisions in an insurance policy too. So restrictive, I don't know, your author put provisions, I think you could call them a covenant too, but restrictive provisions. Don't go riding bulls. Don't jump out of airplanes or something. We'll give you this low rate as long as you don't do this. Bryce.
So I have a question on cancellation. What does it have to be predetermined? Like reasons why they cancel, or can they?
Yes. I mean, it should be in the fine print, and that's where you might end up going to court on something if it's like, or the final paragraph after they tell you a bunch of stuff, and you're on page 46, and it says, or we can cancel you for any reason, or no reason at all. Like that'll be the final statement, honestly, on some contracts. And then whether or not a judge might uphold that or not. But here's the thing, if you're just being canceled, it's kind of hard to say whether you would be, that you can just go buy another policy somewhere else or whatever. So it's not in the event that there was a disputed benefit, you just canceled, right? See what I mean between the difference? Because a disputed benefit's a different story in the fine print. Something happened and they're like, oh, we're not covering you because that was a terrorist act, which is the terrorism stuff is kind of a new thing. And so some companies have tried to carve out domestic terrorism or something along those lines. And so some people might not be covered if that type of event. You have to now carry a rider called a terrorism coverage, an extra little policy that would cover in the event of some terrorism. Okay, and all of that's just trying to navigate through the risk. They're not there to gamble on things. They're there to provide a product and a market for it. All right, so let's look at the overall industry. Your book's got a slide here that so shares of financial intermediary assets. So we got insurance companies, 1970, property and casualty, which I haven't mentioned yet, but that's the car insurance, property insurance, right? And house insurance. I guess we didn't talk about it, but then we have the life insurance. So they got those two things broken down. Pension funds we talked about before on how much money is in there, and public and state. So keeping the public stuff separate from private companies that might have had a pension. Finance companies, we're going to talk about later, GM credit or something, and then mutual funds. And then what's interesting here then is to look over time, right? From 1970, which one's grown the most?
Stocks and bonds.
Stocks and bonds. So look at this. I mean, 1970, 1980. So you can kind of see the evolution of different financial products changing over time. The mutual fund market was very much in the infancy back in the 70s and 80s. The money market, you can see, didn't even exist, but that's dealing with mostly the treasury bills. And so those have kind of grown. Life insurance, pretty stable, a little bit down over time. That one's pretty stable. So we have some growth here with pension funds, private pension funds getting bigger over time. And I think those will start to fall as well. Because what are people doing instead of having a pension? Well, first of all, let's start off. What the heck's a pension? Somebody else who hasn't talked yet, I want to hear what a pension is. If you know it, be proud. Liz. It is money for retirement, but it's a specific type of money. Like, how did it come about? You want to add on? No, it's not so much the tax treatment of it. Jacob?
You mentioned your dad's part of the.
He worked on automobiles.
Yeah.
Group of people that get together and act as one, collective action. Anybody want to help Jacob out? A union. So he's a member of the Teamsters Union, actually, a specific one that the gangster. There's been multiple movies about it, but basically the gangster pissed away my dad's retirement pension in a Las Vegas gamble. I think it might have been even related to the Wynn Hotel or something, but Jimmy Hoffa. You guys heard of Jimmy Hoffa? He was a gangster back in the 70s, 80s, kind of was involved in political life and whatever, but he placed a big bet on a Vegas hotel that involved pension money, and that ended up losing. So kind of some interesting stuff with, union money over time being used. So that's on this private side. So again, let me add on, who wants to add on to what is this union? You mentioned like my dad. Let me go over here, Aaron.
I thought like it was your company basically that you would like when you retired, you have money that you can fall on.
Yes. So the money was in control of the company. So the company says, hey, come work for me. We've got this awesome retirement pension. You're going to love it. Stay here for 30 years, retire, and you have a guaranteed amount that you're going to get during your retirement. In fact, we're going to do it until you die, right? Something along those lines. And so now what has really replaced that? That is kind of a dinosaur now. What's the new thing that's out there that employers are mostly doing for this? Let me go to Zoom. I think one of you guys, Daniel's gone. I will pick on him next time. Oh, there he's coming back. Okay, you heard his name. So Luke, Marco, Daniel, you can raise your hand if you want. What has replaced the pension fund in today's world as a more popular retirement vehicle for private companies? Daniel, go ahead.
The 401k.
Okay, the 401k. Put it in your own words. What does that mean, 401k? Not necessarily 401k, but that sort of thing.
It's a personalized retirement account for each worker that's not tax deferred, that they can invest into, and some companies do a match up to a certain percentage of however much that the person puts in.
Good. So that's the thing now. Now the company, instead of saying, hey guys, come work for me, I've got this awesome pension, it's, hey guys, come work for me, I have a dollar for dollar match. You put in $1, I'll put in $1. How could you go wrong, right? Better yet, you put in $1, I'll put in $2. So you can have various matching plans to make an attractive retirement thing. But the main difference is now the employer's going to contribute that $2. You put in your buck, they put in $2, and that's your relationship's done with them. Now you have it in your name. They contributed $2, you contributed $1, so you got $3. And if you leave that company, you can take that investment account to your new company, or you can just keep it separate, and your new company might have another account. So you can, it's called a rollover. And now that retirement money is always going to stay with you. And so you can go from one company to the next, and maybe they have a match, maybe they don't have a match. But if they have a 401k, it's possible that they can exist without a match. But when you put your money in, if you say, I'm going to contribute $200 a month, then it does have tax benefits. So with a Roth IRA, when does that get taxed? At the end or the beginning? At the beginning, so you pay tax. Whereas a traditional IRA or 401k, you get the tax benefit today. So I make $40,000 a year and I put $10,000 into my 401k, I'm only going to be taxed on 30, right? So the government's giving me a tax benefit today on that money. That is where we're at today, and why you see the evolution of stocks and bonds here is that that has kind of starting to replace, even though this has remained kind of even because they're so big and dinosaurs that have been around. But that's why it's fairly flat on the pension funds, and those will start to disappear over time, moving more towards this type of investment vehicle. Okay, questions or comments there? So here's your depository institutions. It'd kind of be nice if these were all there, but 1970, commercial bank savings and loans. Quite a bit less, right? So over time, these other non-bank finance institutions has started to grow, and traditional banks and stuff, those sorts of things have fallen over this 1980 to 2016 to present day time frame. So that's kind of the shifting of the industry, and why it's a very important part of this class and the financial system is looking at these non-bank areas. All right. Any last questions or comments there? Go back to the board. All right, so with the pension funds, there's two types that you need to know. One is called a defined contribution, and the other one's called the defined benefit. Defined contribution versus defined benefit. All right, so let's write these down. So pension funds. I'm going to rewrite what we just did. This is employer, let's call it employer managed / controlled. That's a little bit misleading in the sense that that's where we have government regulation and government monitoring, and they might have turned it over to some other people to help manage it. So it's not actually your company CEO that's managing it, right? They hired some broker, but it's still under their control. And the two types then, one is the defined contribution plan. And that means that the benefits at retirement depend on the contribution. Some of you might think, well, that is crazy. Of course it does. Well, it doesn't have to be that way. And then number two is the defined benefit plan. So with the defined benefit plan, it's all figured backwards in a sense. So the back end is fixed. The benefit is fixed. So example, at retirement, you get $1,000 per month. The benefit is fixed. That's how it was sold to you. We're going to have so much money in this account that we can afford to pay you that. All right, so let's do a little example here. So suppose you have $1,000 contribution per year. $1,000 contribution per year for 10 years. How would the company start to plan for payments? How would the company start to try to figure out what kind of fund they're going to be dealing with in 10 years? What would they need to do? What sort of calculation do you see brewing here? Lawson, what are you smirking about something? You think you got it or what? Or were you smirking about last night's fun we had on the date?
Future value.
Future value, yeah. So we got a future value calculation, right? Pretty easy. So how would we set this problem up? Future value of this thing is equal to, help me out with the formula. We got $1,000.
Yeah, so that's your payment.
So that's the,
Or that's your payment.
that's the payment. So $1,000.
1 plus 10%.
10%, if it was 10%, where's this coming from, I guess? The interest rate, so is that guaranteed that they're getting that interest rate? So what interest rate are they plugging in, the company now, thinking about, I got $1,000, how much am I gonna have in the future? What are they plugging in here? Is 10% the right number? Real rate of return, yeah, I mean, we might want to, we don't have to bring in inflation right now, but yeah, if usually with the word real, you're thinking something with inflation. Could be. So they're trying to figure out expected rate of return on what?
On the 10 years. So
Where's this coming from? Or is that a cost to us or a benefit? Is the employee paying us 10%? I'm kind of confused. You guys got me all worked up here. What's this 10%? Eddie said it first. How about you guys on Zoom? Are you as confused as everybody in the room, or you got this figured out? Where'd the 10% come from? Or what is it? Or what does it need to be?
Would it be the market value
Market value of what?
of pension funds at the time?
So the value of pension funds? So like they might have built up to be $10 million or something, or?
I mean, no, I'm saying maybe like, you know how like bonds, they go for premium discounts, that type of thing, or pensions would do the same thing.
All right, so the pension's going to be doing what with your $1,000 that you're contributing? Investing. So what belongs here?
The market interest rate?
Market interest rate, or the market value of the things you're investing in, right?
Yeah.
If it's stocks and bonds, if it's bonds, it might be something. If it's stocks, it might be something, or we might be looking at the overall portfolio of stocks and bonds and do some sort of risk-weighted average of we're going to have 80% in stocks and 20% in bonds, and what's the expected rate of return over the next 10 years of those things. So they're just doing what we do, right? The difference is we're trying to build up this account so that it's sufficient to pay the retiree at the end. Okay, so we got the 1 plus the 10% raised to the 1 power. And again, the 10% assumes rate of return from invested contributions is 10%. That's what the company's thinking. Maybe they put some thought into that. Maybe it's 8%, maybe it's 9%, maybe it's 12, whatever, but it's some number. All right, plus $1,000 raised to the 1 plus 10% to the second power plus ... the 1,000 raised to the 1 plus 10% raised to the 10th power. And then whatever that number is the amount of our defined benefit plan. Okay, so this is the expected value of the pension fund in the future. Add up those numbers. Of course, we have thousands of employees doing the same thing. So we're just doing a expectation of where that's at. All right, so are they going to be right with their projections always perfectly?
Probably not.
No, probably not. So maybe we have to be a little more conservative. You know, all those are all the discussions, but they're almost certainly going to be too fat or too thin, right? They're not going to be right on the money. They're either going to be too fat or too thin. So that brings up the concept of having a fully funded or underfunded, it could be overfunded, pension fund. So a fully funded, a fully funded pension fund is one where what? Now you got this concept going. So now we've got employees that are 30 years old. We've got employees that are 40 years old. We've got some that are 80 that retired 20 years ago. So tell me what a fully funded pension fund looks like, thinking about this dynamic. What is a fully funded pension fund?
Would it be just as it sounds and just a pension fund that you don't really, it just already has the funds in it? Is it just basically what it sounds?
So we have you got half of it. So
Okay.
the first part of it, if we want to start off a sentence, would be where the value of the fund today, right? That's kind of what you're saying, right? The value of the fund today, if it's $10 billion pension fund or something. So let's go ahead and put that on here. So where the value of the fund today, and now we need more added onto that. So let's go to Daniel.
Does it have to do with the expected rate of return?
Kind of. If you want to expand on that.
Whatever your future value is, that's what you get, right?
So Brady, what do you mean the future value?
So let's say we do that formula and it comes out to be X amount at the end, or in the future, you're going to get that X amount.
So what do we need to do with that X amount? What do we need to do with the amount that I now have a 30-year-old employee that is in, and I also got the 80-year-old who retired 20 years ago, and I've got the 50-year-old who's going to retire in about the next 10 years, or at least be retirement eligible. So a fully funded pension fund is one where the value of the fund today, so let's just say it's $10 billion. And then finish the sentence here, Aaron.
Will be the same as it is in the future.
Will be the same as it is in the future. I don't think the way this one started off that you'd want to finish it that less than it is in the future. So what would we want to compare about the future stuff? So the pension fund's worth $10 billion right now today. What would we need to do? What do we have coming up in the future? Jonathan? Inflation, yes, but we can do some inflation. I'm not as worried about inflation with this. We need to take inflation into account, but people retire. So we got them retiring. One's in 10 years. One's already retired. One's retired. What about the 80-year-old? Let's just back up a second. What about the 80-year-old that's retired and we promised that we pay them until they die? What are we doing with that guy? How much do I owe him? He's 80 years old right now. Retired from the company 20 years ago, still kicking, has one glass of beer a day, keep his heart going. What do we got to do with him?
Maybe shrink how much you give them a month,
Shrink it by how much?
10%, however much the.
So what are we doing with these future payments of the 80-year-old, as well as the future payments of the 50-year-old, who I'm not even paying yet? What am I doing? What do I need to do to finish off this up? I got 10 billion in the fund today. In order to say that the pension is fully funded, what do I need to meet the obligations of? No, not the 10 billion. You've got 10 billion to try to satisfy what? Jacob? The people that are already retired and people that will be retired. And so what do I need to do to compare it to the value of the fund today? Those are all future payments, right? So what do we do with future payments to figure out what they're worth today? Present value. Now think about that equation. I'm not even going to lay it out, but you've got the 80-year-old who's expected to croak by age 85, right? We can put a probability of that happening. And so we've got 5 years worth of payments on that guy. We've got the 50-year-old who's going to start the payment stream in 10 years. We've got the 30-year-old who's going to start the payment stream in 30 years. So we just enter all that stuff in and then take the present value. And in order to be fully funded, what has to be true about the present value of those future payments compared to the 10 billion we have today? Equal or less than. We have the money to do it, right? That's our normal kind of investing. We pull through the classic car example. We buy a piece of real estate in Ottawa, Kansas. We invest in the stock market. All of that stuff kind of comes back. This is just a pretty sophisticated present value calculation. And that's how we would tackle that. That's how we tackle any of these problems when it comes down to the time value of money. You need to bring money into the future or back into the past. It doesn't matter which way you do it, as long as you end up in the same time frame. With specifically the fully funded pension fund, do we have a good idea of what it is today? Is that a pretty known commodity of the value of the pension fund today? Daniel, you say yes, shaking your head. We know what it is today, right? It's the stock market. We have X shares of Apple. We've got X shares of Facebook. We got X shares of GameStop, right? We add it all up, and that's the value of the pension fund today. And so then we have on an ongoing basis an estimate of the present value of the funds that we need today. All right, so a fully funded pension fund is where the value of the fund today is greater than or equal to the present value of future expected benefits paid. Pretty easy at the end of the day, but you got to train yourself to kind of think about things that way. That's the way all of this stuff's going to kind of fall back to. Okay, and so I might put a little side note. If it's underfunded, then this equation is just going the opposite direction. Right? So that's the problem that a lot of these places have found. So underfunded pension is, instead of greater than, we got less than. And so if you watch a few movies, one of my favorites being Wall Street. Have any of you watched the original Wall Street from 1987, Gordon Gekko? Oh, you need to. It's still really good. So one of the things that the corporate raider, Gordon Gekko, used to go buy companies and bust them up. They were maybe failing companies like GameStop or something. They would look for, at the pension fund, and the company's kind of going broke anyway. they do a corporate takeover and kind of screw the employees over potentially by reducing the pension or selling off part of the pension that was overfunded. And so they might have been able to do some trickery on that. I don't know if trickery is the right word, but maybe somewhat immoral but legal maneuvers that were able to be done during the 1980s and 90s with corporate takeovers in dealing with these pension funds and big companies that were starting to fall apart. And that's why the focus shifted into 401ks, where we're putting the power back into the employee, right? That's in their control, and then they don't have to worry about how successful the company is down the road. One other comment to make on here is vesting. So vesting, this can be true at 401k at Ottawa. I think it's, well, let's see, you got to start doing it right. No, you have, is it 3 years? I think you can choose to opt out until you're vested. So you come to work for my company, we have a 2-for-1 match. But if you don't stay with us for at least a year, I get my money back, right? You don't get my 2-for-1 match if you leave my company too soon. So vesting is a period of time the employee must work to qualify for the retirement benefit. All the more important with pensions the way they were done, because they just said, well, everybody who works for us is going to get $1,000 per month at retirement. Well, I work for you for 5 years, I want my 1,000, right? So there'd be some differences on that of how long you had to work there if you left and what you get. Okay, so pension funds have something similar to FDIC. What was FDIC from last week? Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, right? FDIC. And what did it do?
Insure your deposit.
Okay, so you had your money insured up to $250,000. Who paid the premiums from that little video we did, or from your reading and your homework and tests that you did? Who paid the premiums? The bank, right? And so they paid the bank. And so there's a similar thing that evolved for pension benefits. So with the private pension, let's call it safety net, the government, they can just print off money, so it's less important for the government, although there was one for the states. So there was this employee retirement income security. This one had a long name, but known as the ERISA laws. And this one, I actually serve on the retirement committee for Ottawa University, so I've kind of dove in a little deep. This was 1974, and so it was originally done there, and they created something of Penny Benny. Penny Benny. Kind of like we have these cutesy names for these other organizations. So Penny Benny was the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation. Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation. And this is the one that's kind of like FDIC. And so company pays premiums, and in 2013, for example, the retiree was protected up to $54,000 per year. $54,000 up to $54,000 per year per person protected of people that participated in penny Benny. And so this is, again, just another law that evolved over time to try to give people some protections. Okay, employer, you're going to give your employees a retirement benefit that's a pension. If you do it that way, you're going to have to start paying some premiums and keep an insurance policy. We don't trust you. Some of you have been bad boys and girls over time, and so you're going to have to do this. Does this add cost or lower cost for the employer to offer this type of benefit? It would add cost, right? And so then all of a sudden the employers are like, I'm not doing a pension benefit anymore. Or maybe we'll start to move towards a matching system and a new product will evolve like the 401k. So that's part of the evolution of the market changing, depending on what government policies might be going on at the time. Okay, how about public pension? So this idea of pension plans works for the federal government too. What's the most famous public pension plan? What plan? I'm not a fan of this plan, actually. Social Security, right? So that is the general public. You work, you pay. Now, some of you have started, did you guys have some of your tax things trickling in from your employer? Did you see that Social Security tax? I think they actually call it a tax, thank goodness, and not an investment, because it's really what it is.
I don't even look at the taxes, to be honest, anymore.
Okay, well, it's on your what do we call it? W-2, W-4, 2. So it's on your W-2, and you guys all have it. Even if you're a dirt poor college student, you are paying tax. How much is that tax? Do they know that you're paying?
Too much.
Too much. Yeah, it adds up. If you look at your little W-2, it adds up. Anybody know how much you're paying? You can kind of do the math if you wanted. It's close to 8, 7.5.
Oh, dang it.
And the actual total tax is 15. Who pays the other half? Your employer. So there's the employer side and the employee side. So with Social Security, employer gets zapped with 7.5% of your pay, and the employee pays 7.5% for a grand total of 15. Guess what self-employed people have to pay? 15. Because you are not only the employer, you're kind of like an employee, so we're going to have you pay both. So this is private, self-employed people. Sometimes people get a little bit of a shock when they start their new business. They're like, wow, I didn't know I had to pay 15% into Social Security. And so now we start to see why maybe Social Security needs some reform, because it is fully funded or underfunded? Underfunded. Now, thank goodness it's the government who controls the printing press. You guys will get paid, no problem. What's going to happen if they pay you that way, which I don't think they will, by the way. Well, there'll be some, you're just going to get your benefits reduced, but
$30 cheeseburger.
what, a $30 cheeseburger, yeah. We're back to, you guys have brought up inflation. I'm glad you are keeping that at the top of your mind. But if the government pays for Social Security through printing off money, of course, we know the end result of that will be a $30 cheeseburger, and you will still lose. So you're going to pay one way or the other, and it'll probably be through a cut in benefits. So this is massively underfunded. So massively underfunded. And we can't figure out any politicians that have the courage or otherwise to do. So massively underfunded, so don't bank on it, kids. So don't plan your retirement around that wonderful Social Security check you're gonna get. All right, that looks like a good place to wrap on a real high note for your Social Security.